No two ways about it, making nice looking hair in 3D is pretty tough. We all have hair, or most of us have hair. We've at least seen it. Some of us see it every day. Some of us have wives that shed relentlessly, so we have an intimate familiarity with hair. So why is it so complicated to create in a 3D space? If you're anything like me, you've either tried to learn it before and eventually gave up when you got stuck, or you've remained intimidated and just stick with the geometry hair or a low effort hat. I've been there. In fact, I was there a little less than a year ago. But since cracking the code and realizing how absurdly easy it can be, I've made a ton of hair. Some pretty good, some kind of bad, just like real life. So by the end of this tutorial, I can promise you will actually understand how Blender's hair system works. You'll be equipped with the tools and the mastery to create any hairstyle you can conceive of without any hesitation. So welcome to today's episode, Perfect Hair for Mograph 2.0. My name is Elijah Sheffield. I go by Sweet Boy on the internet. I make tutorials just like this one, teaching people to use Blender to create stylized, beautiful 3D art. In fact, I've made a tutorial just like this one. One of my early tutorials was teaching hair in Blender. I was 8 months dumber and still experimenting with video styles, leading to an ornamental overlay which received aggressive reviews. So I am back to address the topic of hair. Teach some things that I didn't know then, discuss some interesting workflows, dive deeper into the topic, and do all of that without a stupid overlay. So everyone calm down. We'll start out today's tutorial with business in the front. We'll cover the fundamentals of creating a hair system, diving deeper into the tools and the workflows. Then we'll finish off the video with a party in the back. We'll create a full mullet from start to finish so you can see my full workflow in practice, not just in concept. You can actually download a free practice head on my website. You can go over there, it'll be linked down below. Or if you have a character handy, just go ahead and pop that open and we can use that for this demonstration. All of these practices are conceptual enough that you could do it on a sphere and it would still work. We're learning skills and how to apply them, not just specific procedures and practices. Now, if you're not subscribed, be sure you do that. Like this video. Consider joining members only. You can get access to project files, some more intensive breakdowns, and access to the Fort, a private Discord server. We've got a lot to cover today. Enough talk, let's get into it. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is go over the bare essentials to creating a functional hair system in Blender. So the first thing I want you to do is go to our render property settings right here, and we're just going to make sure the shape is rounded ribbons under the curves drop down right here, and we're going to change the shape from strand to strip. Let's just make sure these match our settings here. And the second thing we need to do is to create a hair cap. Now, a hair cap is just going to be a duplicate piece of geometry that will allow you to actually stick the hairs on the head, and you can have a little bit more density and add some vertex maps or some vertex painting, and it won't impact anything else with your mesh. This is a best practice scenario, so let's just go through and do it together here. So I'm going to select my mesh here. Yours will look a little bit different because I have the full character here, and we're just going to tab into edit mode, and we're just going to select the pieces that we need. Now, as you'll see, I have the ears off by default. That's just so I can select things a little bit easier. I'm going to hold down Z and go into wireframe mode, and then I'm going to change my selection method to a select lasso. I'll switch back into face mode here, and I'm just going to select the pieces that the hair will actually be extruded from. So something like this is usually about good. And what I like to do is kind of give myself a little bit more than what I think I'll actually need. So I'm going to select all the way down to here just so I can have the sideburns, and I'll select this region as well. Probably not necessary, but again, I just like to give myself the most amount of real estate possible. So now what we're going to do is hit Shift D to duplicate that, and we'll right click to confirm it, and then we'll hit P, and we can separate the selection from the head. So now we have a hair cap that is correctly UV mapped. It matches if you've already rigged your character. It's rigged to your character rig already. So now with the hair cap selected, we're actually going to go ahead and go into the modifiers here, and we're just going to apply the subdivision surface. Now this is what I like to do. You don't have to do it yourself, but I find that having more geometry to work with, more vertices to actually paint, increases the quality of the hair output. So we'll do that. So from here, let's just make sure our hair cap is selected still. We're going to hit Shift A and go down to Curve. We're going to find Empty Hair. We can just click that and add it in. And now we have hair on the object. You can see we have surface deform. And although it's not visible here, we can actually start to add in curves. So we can go up to Object Mode and go down to Sculpt Mode like this. And now you'll see we have a little suite of tools that are a little bit different from the typical sculpt tools. If you had an object selected and you went to the sculpt mode, you get different tools, but because we have the curve selected, or the hair object selected, we have a bit different tool set. So let's go up to add right here. It'll be this little green hair with the plus. And if we just start clicking, it's going to start adding some hairs. Now what this does is add hair curve guides. Now we're not going to go through and add in each individual hair curve by itself. That would be way over the top and really frustrating. So instead what we're going to do is use these hair guides to inform the information of geometry nodes of where the hair should go and how it should move. So this is the fundamental building block of creating hair, is adding these hair curve guides. Now something pretty great, I'm just going to undo all this so we go back to 0 here, is actually toggling on the X symmetry up here in the top right. And so now when we add hairs, it mirrors it over the X axis. So that we have mirrored hairs. We don't have to add one and then try to guess and get it somewhat close on the other side. We can keep it precise like that. So that's a really good way of starting to form out the fundamentals and blocking out the hair initially. Now we need to go over hair modifiers. So just like when you're modeling or creating something, you can add in some modifiers, which are technically geometry node systems, but you can add in modifiers that actually affect the hair, and that's how we're going to build out nice looking hair. Again, that's not these weird creepy spikes sticking out of the top of a head. So let's go from sculpt mode back into object mode here, and we can go down to the bottom right of our little window, and we can drag out another window. We'll just snap it to the middle. We're going to change this from 3D viewport all the way over to asset browser, and that's a lot of screen real estate, so we can kind of drop this down and close it. And I'm just going to go to hair. Now, if you have other asset libraries already loaded up into your Blender file, then you might have those available, but you should by default have a hair tab here. So make sure that's clicked, and you'll see we have these nice icons that just kind of give us a whole bunch of different options. So we'll go through the 3 fundamental ones, the 3 that you have to have in order to have somewhat of a hair system going on. Now the first one is interpolate hair. Interpolate hair works a lot like a connect the dots. You set, 5 or 6 different guide hairs, and then Blender does the actual heavy lifting of saying, we're going to interpolate these or kind of fill in the gaps and set child particles of these hairs all over the surface. So we can actually find this right here, interpolate hair curves, and we can just drag and drop this onto our curves. Now, as you notice, it went away. It's no longer there. So what we need to do is go to our modifier stack right here, and we can select our hair cap right there. It was kind of finicky to do, so let's go ahead and actually rename this. I'm going to rename this from cube.001 to hair cap. Okay. And now you can see we have 3 hairs. Now, obviously, that's not what we want. We want there to be a plethora of hairs. So let's go ahead and select our hair cap again here. And you'll see I have some vertice groups here, some vertex groups, and all of these are from the actual rig. So I'm going to go and lock all of these. I'll add a new one, and I'll just name this density mask, like that. Okay, so now I can go up to object mode and go down to weight painting, which is a very scary topic, I recognize, for a lot of people. But this is a really low stakes. It's very easy to do. We're just going to make sure X symmetry is turned on. And we're just going to draw in a little piece right here. Okay, we're just going to constrain it to the very top. Now we can go back into object mode. So with the density mask here, I'm just going to copy that so I have the exact name. We're going to go back to our hair object and go down to the density mask here in the interpolate curves modifier. We're going to click this little flag and paste the word density mask. And now we can see it's 1 hair, which is great. It's better than 3 that are all over the place. So the density is actually kind of relative. If you have a relatively small character or a huge character, it's going to change the density that's needed. Now, for the size of my character, it's probably going to need to be pretty huge. So I'm going to start at like 5,000. And that's not going to be enough by a long shot. So we're just going to push this up to 25,000. Okay, so now we can see he's looking really great. That's a really great hairstyle. But if we get close here, you can see the hair all looks like strips. So the second thing that is the most integral piece to any hair system is the set hair curve profile modifier. So it's down here at the bottom of the stack. We can drag and drop it there. So you can see here it actually went from these kind of picket fence looking thing to a actual hair, more of a spike, more of a triangle. So if I toggle the slack here and drop these down, I'm just going to scooch this up so we can see. The set hair curve profile actually gives us some more parameters to change the width of the hair, so make it a smaller hair, make it more photorealistic, or also change the shape of it. So we're just going to drop this way down, I think probably like 0.0001. It's going to be too thin, 0.005. Okay, I think that's pretty good. That's going to look a lot more like hair. It's a little denser or a little bit thicker than real hair, but that's okay. We can just come back in here. I'm going to increase this to 15,000. For some reason, it got rid of the 25,000 that I did previously, but okay, there we go. And as you can see, it is interpolating those hair on the vertex map. And so if I were to go back in here and go into the vertex paint, I could just come back in here and change my painting a little bit, and it would continue to add or remove hairs based on where the vertex map is. And the last modifier that is absolutely crucial and necessary to creating a hair system actually comes on it by default. When you add it in, you might notice there is a modifier here, a little geometry node modifier called surface deform. Now, surface deform is necessary to keep the hair attached to the surface of the head, or in our case, the hair cap. If you were to have the face rigged or have the character rigged, and you didn't have the surface deform, it would just stay in place. So this deforms the hair across the profile of the geometry itself, and then if we move the head back and forth, if it were rigged, the hair would travel along with it correctly. So let's go ahead and just delete these hairs, and we can grab our hair cap and we can add in a new hair empty hair rather, and we're going to actually use this to create hero hairs. So I'm going to go from object mode to sculpt mode, and again I'm just going to add in with the X symmetry turned on like 2 or 3 hairs, and we're going to use these to just be some sweeping bangs or something. So obviously, unless you are a punk rocker, nobody really has hair that just sticks straight up all the time. So what we need to do is actually control this so it has a bit more of a sweeping action. We're going to use this to create what are called hero hairs. It would be 1 or 2 hair pieces or hair locks that would be used to kind of have like a curl coming down, or maybe a piece that's like a strand that's just kind of going by itself. And that's the idea here. So we're going to change our tool from the add tool down here at the bottom to the comb tool. Now you can change the size of the comb tool with F, and now we're just going to comb it out. Now it works a lot like a comb. It doesn't actually work like the grab brush or the move brush from like sculpting or something like that. It works like a comb. So you have to move it along. So you have to kind of comb it into place correctly. So we're just going to kind of comb this into kind of a side profile curve here. We will get into the sculpting tools later on. We don't have to get too in the weeds with it right now. We can just kind of keep it light and breezy. I think something like that is going to look nice. It doesn't look nice, but I think something like that is going to work. So these bangs are a little bit too long, so we can switch over to our grow and shrink tool. Again, we'll get into this more deeply later on, but we can hold down Control and just kind of click and scrub into the world, and it shrinks that down. So now we have a little bit more of a nice looking hair piece, I guess. So now instead of using interpolate hair curves, which is what we did previously, where it just interpolated all the hair between the guides, we're going to use duplicate hair curves. And what that's going to do is take the curves that we just laid out, and it's going to duplicate hair around that individual curve. So now we can see the amount is set to 10, and we can change the radius, which will actually constrain it how far away from the curve it's going. So we can increase that to something like, I don't know, 0.016 is probably okay. And we can increase the amount so it becomes thicker. And of course, we're going to add on the set hair profile. We can drop this down to something more reasonable, like that. And now you can see we actually are starting to get some hair curves. So again, I can increase this to like 500, and they're actually starting to look good. And I can change the radius out so they kind of start to merge a little bit more, and the locks of hair look a little bit thicker. So that is the general basics of hair in Blender. Now there's obviously so much more. This is a horrible looking hairstyle, and we'll get into some more advanced techniques to start to actually style it and make it look nice. But this is the bare minimum essentials of actually getting into hair. Assuming you've never touched the hair modifiers or geometry node hair in Blender, this is kind of your really rough crash course to it. If you're learning something or you're having a good time, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Like the video, leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if you're interested in learning Blender more intensely, or you just want a community of designers to join, consider joining members only. It's a membership right here on YouTube. It's $10 a month. It gets you access to exclusive videos where I break down projects more deeply. It gets you free project files, and it gets you admittance into the Fort, a private Discord server with a whole bunch of your peers and 3D artists and all kinds of different designers in there, just chatting, helping each other, just kind of cutting it all up. So consider joining. I'll have that linked below. You'd be supporting the channel and getting a lot of exciting content. All right, back to the video. Okay, so for the second chapter, we're actually going to get into styling and understanding how to design hair. There's a little bit that goes into it, and you have to understand how hair works, at least to some degree, in order to create convincing hair in 3D. So let's look at this mullet that I have here. I used Envado's AI image generator to create a mullet for me. I googled mullet and I couldn't find a really good view of it, and this just kind of got it right off the rip, so why not go with this? Now, the first thing we need to understand is actually hair flow. Where is the hair coming from? So I'm going to create a little layer here in Photoshop, and we're just going to take a look at where the hair is coming from. So you can see here, it's kind of being pushed from the front to the back like this. And this is still coming down here, and this is all kind of funneling down into this middle piece right here. So it's all kind of coming down, and then it's starting to flip out on the ends here. And of course, there's kind of this wavy pattern that I think is nice, but all the ends are just starting to kind of flip out. So it all kind of flows and cascades down, which is really nice. So this is the general flow. Okay, we need something to start from the front and then push down to the back and then flip out as we get further down the hair flow. And now we're going to analyze it for its layers. Now, obviously, this is a very textured hairstyle, but we can kind of figure out where we need to chunk up the layers, and so that maybe that can help inform our decisions of how we're actually going to go about creating this. Now, just from the jump, I can see here we have the very long pieces here that maybe start about right here, and then they kind of push down, and so we have one layer here that's still about like a normal hairstyle, and then pieces that start maybe around here are the ones that actually have the length, the full length. So they go all the way down like this. I should have changed color, but it's okay. And then we have the sides here, which still kind of push down into each other. So I'll kind of hint at a side back there. And then of course we have the top, and the top all pushes back as well, but it is its own layer as well. So really what we have is 1, 2, 3, and 4 layers. We're not really going for, kind of the new age coffee barista mullet. We're going for more of the classic Mel Gibson and Braveheart type of a mullet. That's really what we're going for here. So before we really get into building the mullet, let's go ahead and take some time to get a little bit more familiar with our tools and some of our modifiers. Now let's start with the most basic of the tools. We're going to hit Shift A once again, and we're going to go into Curve and add an empty hair, and then we're going to go into Sculpt mode. And let's just add in a few hairs so that we have something to deal with here. Now, if we were to just click and drag, you see that it adds quite a few hairs as I'm just kind of dragging around. And if I change the brush size by hitting F, it's much denser. So the size of the brush impacts the frequency of placing it down as you click and drag. Now, I don't really click and drag very often. I like to be a lot more tactical with placing things. So that's kind of what I do. Now, another thing you might notice is as we start to place down hairs, they're all one length. And if we tab into edit mode, they all have the exact same amount of subdivisions. So what I'm going to do is go into curve shape, and I'm going to change the length to 0.1. That will be a third of what it was originally. And I'm going to change the amount of points to, I'm going to say 20. I think that's going to be appropriate, at least for a starting place to sculpt a hair curve. So now if I place them down, we can see they're much shorter. They're literally 1/3 of the size. And then if I tab into edit mode, we can see they have 20 subdivisions there. So then if I were to try to comb it, it's a much smoother comb than what we had previously, which was 8. Now, another thing you can do with the add brush here is, again, under curve shape, you can change the interpolation, not just from radius, but also the length and the shape. And I'll show you exactly what this does. Let's say we had some hairs that were kind of already combed into shape here, and I wanted to add in another curve. Now, when I add it in, I don't want it to just be sticking straight up, and then I have to go and comb it in and have it integrate. So in the add brush right here, when you go to curve shape and you tick on the length and the shape radius, if I start placing down hairs, it follows kind of the flow of traffic of the rest of the hair, which is really, really helpful, especially when you're working with a whole big hair system. Now let's take a look at a few of the sculpting tools we have available. Now we've already talked a little bit about the comb tool. I think it's pretty neat. I think it's pretty great. We have, of course, the ability to comb on a mirrored axis. We also have the ability to turn on collision sculpt. And from here, you can also change the collision distance. And this will just make it so you can never, I need to drop that way down. You can never actually comb it into the skull. It will stop on the skull right there, and it will never actually comb into it, which is super helpful if you do it right. It can also get really irritating if you do it wrong, so be careful with that. Now, we already briefly touched on it, but we have the grow and shrink tool here. We can use this to grow the hair, and if you hold control, it shrinks the hair. Nothing particularly crazy, but we can also use a pull tips, which is very similar, but it's a combination of the comb tool and the grow tool. So if we comb it out, we can drag it, and it will it will elongate and lengthen the hair to the smoothness of our comb, which is mildly useful in some cases and kind of irritating in others. Now we also have the pinch tool, which does exactly what it sounds like. It pinches it up, so that's perfect for like mohawk spikes or something like a ponytail where you want to pull all the hair back and cinch it correctly. So that's really useful for that. You can also hold control, and that does the inverse. It like explodes it out. I've never really used that, but it is there. On that same tone, I suppose, we have the puff brush, which when you scrub it down, it puffs everything up and makes it stand straight out, which can be really nice if you kind of need to like reset your hair to make a move on that. Now you also have the ability to smooth. If you take a look at this, this hair is all messed up. It looks like it's been through the garbage disposal. So we can just smooth that out with the smooth brush here, tab back into edit mode, and it looks really nice. So if you get hairs that get a little bit out of whack and look a little bit bad, you can always choose the smooth tool, and it just smooths out those vertices just like it would in like a sculpting mode. And the last one here that we're going to go over is the slide. Now, slide is fantastic because if you have a hair that's just not quite right, we see maybe we have our hairline back here, and this one is a little bit too far back, so we just want to pull them up like that. And this guy's a little too far up, so we just want to pull him back. That is exactly what that's for. Now, you can tab into edit mode, and you can select these. You can see we have two different modes. We have point mode, just like an object mode, and then we can hit 2 or change it over here, and that's curve mode. We can grab the entire curve, and then we can move it around. We can scale it. We can rotate it, just like we could to any other object. But it is kind of annoying to have to do all of that when you just have this move brush right here, the slide brush rather. You can just slide it on the surface. Now, another thing to note, if you tab into edit mode, you can select individual hairs. You can shift select a whole bunch of them like this. And then if you tab back into sculpt mode, these are masked, so you can't affect any of the curves around them, any of the hairs around them. You can only affect the hair objects or the curves that are highlighted. So that's a basic overview of the sculpting tools. Let's go over a few of the modifiers that are really instrumental in creating nice stylized hair. The first one that we're going to take a look at is the hair curves noise. Now in object mode, you can grab this modifier and just drag and drop it onto our little hair system here. It doesn't look great, but it's going to be good enough to kind of show what's going on. Now, as you can tell immediately, it added quite a bit of noise. You can see what's going on if we just toggle this on and off. And what it's doing is just adding a general noise texture to the actual hair curves itself. So it just adds some random variation. That can be really helpful in kind of breaking up monotonous kind of sterile looking hair and just making it feel a little bit more natural. So some of the things that you really want to dial in is the distance in the scale. So we can increase the distance and it makes it way bigger, or we can dial it back quite a bit and it makes it a lot smaller. And the scale, of course, impacts how big the noise is that's actually affecting the hair. So once you get something that feels maybe just about right, but it's just a little too much, you can change the factor and drop it back down quite a bit. And it's just a way to kind of choke back the effect that you have. Now, the second modifier that I think is worth noting is the roll hair curves. Now this one is pretty cool. I don't use it a whole lot. I've used it before for things like the George Washington hair where he has the kind of like rollers. This is really great for black hair where you have those really tight springy curls. But aside from black hair, very springy curls or something weird like a George Washington hair, there's not a whole lot of use for it, but it's good to kind of play around with it and kind of understand what it does. So obviously you can see here, you can roll it down, and that's exactly what it does. As you roll it, you can change the roll radius, so it's a lot tighter. and then you can roll it all the way down like that. There's roll depth. There's a lot of little parameters that you can tweak to get it to look quite right, but that's essentially what it does. I mean, that's really all you need to know is the roll length and the roll radius. It just pulls it all the way down to the scalp in these really tight rolled curls. So the next modifier that we're going to take a look at is the trim hair curves right here. We can just drag and drop it right there. And as you can see, it just makes the hair much longer. It follows the trajectory of the hair itself. And we have the ability to change the length and some of these parameters, but we also have the ability to replace the length altogether. So all of this right now is uniform length because it's replacing the length. And if I were to just click off replace, now it's a length factor, and it's growing at the same relative length that it was before. So something really great about this is if you accidentally made your hair curves a little bit too long, you can kind of choke it back a little bit, and you can use a mask to actually tell it how dense it should be, how differently the lengths should be. So you can color just like we did for the density mask. You can use a length mask. And red will mean it's very short, and blue, or no influence, will mean that it's very long. So you could use that to make the mullet later on, or if you wanted to get kind of a nice fade, you could use it for something like that. And that brings us to clump hair curves. Now I'm going to add in a duplicate hair curves just so you can kind of see what is going on a little bit better. It looks a little bit bad, but that's okay. We're going to use clump hair curves right here. And as you can see, all that does is just clump the hair together. In my opinion, this is one of the most useful tools in creating stylized hair. But something kind of interesting that you might take note of, you have tip spread. So this will just make sure it looks a little bit more realistic. You also have these shapes, so you can make it look a little bit more puffed up and have it a bit more of a dome on it. And you can make it a little more pinched so it kind of looks like this, or you can bring it all the way down and have it feel like a sprig of grass or almost a toothbrush. So that's doable, that's possible, but really the clump is fantastic just on its own. It works really great at just kind of creating those hair clumps, which if we go back to our mullet picture here, you can see there are actually these really nice clumps that kind of push together. And clumping is a very large part of creating nice dynamic looking hair. So something else to take note of, right now this is using the existing guide maps. So the guides that we put in, the few little hair curves that we actually have here, that's what it's using to determine what a clump is. It's taking all the hair and it's clumping it to that guide curve. But if we turn off this little toggle right here, we can tell it how much it should actually be reading into this. So if we set the distance to 0, there's going to be no hair clumps because it's not really trying to figure out what's going on. And if we turn this up, it will start interpolating how many hairs should be clumped per clump of hair. So that can be really helpful in kind of creating these nice kind of stylized looking things. Here we have something that looks like Syndrome from The Incredibles, I guess. It doesn't look great, but that is exactly what that does. And now finally we have the curl hair curves. Now this is something I use with pretty much every single one of my characters, even if it doesn't have curly hair necessarily. I still use this because it gives it a nice random kind of nice wave texture that feels rooted in realism and kind of the chaos of real hair, but still gives it enough structure that it feels stylized. It doesn't just feel chaotic. So with this, I like to always turn off existing guide map and then work with the distance and kind of determine how far each one of these guide distances need to be. I'm just going to set it to something like this for now. I'm just going to set it really low. And then from there, I change the radius. So the radius is going to be how thick the actual curl or the tube, if you think of it like tubes of curls, how thick that is going to be. So we're going to drop this down to something like this. And then we can play with the frequency, which is how many times the curl curls around. So we can drop the frequency quite a bit, and then it gives it this nice random looking feel. Now, obviously this doesn't look good, not even a little bit. It doesn't even almost look good, but as we get into the mullet in the next chapter, you'll kind of see where this really starts to take place. Alright, so now we're going to actually make a mullet from the start to the finish. So again, looking at our annotation here, we have our 4 parts that we need to make. We need to make the long tail behind. We need to make the kind of tapered piece that's falling into it. We need to make the sides that also cascade down. And then of course we need to make the hair that actually goes on top. So let's go back into Blender, and we're just going to select our hair cap, and we'll hit Shift A and add in an empty hair, and we can call this mullet sides, just like that. Okay, now the first thing that we're going to need to actually do is add in a few guide pieces. Now again, we can look back at our thing here. We need to add some guide pieces that are going to start kind of here at the nape of the neck, and I think maybe actually right here. Kind of similar to where the ears are, that's where we're going to start going down into the nape of the neck. So let's start by selecting these. We can go into sculpt mode here. We will click add, and then let's set our curve shape. We can turn off the length and shape interpolation. We're going to set the length to something like, I don't know, 0.2. We'll see how that gets us. And then we can just start adding in some curves. Can go back into the comb. I have it in my quick favorites here, so we'll go back into comb, and we can just kind of comb this down into place like this. And remember, our guide or our annotation here, it kind of flips out. So we can always tweak this when we come back, but it's better to just do it the first time. We're just going to kind of flip this out at the ends and make sure that it kind of has a mullet-y type feel to it. Okay, so then we'll go back into the add menu. And we're going to now change this to the length and the radius, or the length and the shape. And now when we start adding these guide curves, they're going to actually kind of be in place. And we want to leave plenty of space to come back and to change the actual the top of the headband here. So I think that's good. We'll go back into comb, and as we can see, it started to get a little bit raised. We still want it to kind of lay flatter, so we can take our comb and just kind of lay this down a little bit. And most of the styling is going to actually come with the modifiers, but it's never a bad idea to do as much of the styling as you can get away with from the jump. So something like this. Okay, very cool. Now we can add in the second part here. I'm going to double click A to deselect that. I'm going to go up to my curve shape. I'm going to tick off length, and I'm going to set the length to let's do 0.08, because it needs to be quite a bit shorter, but still kind of match the same vibe. So that, I think that's going to work. So we'll just start placing these here. So now let's go ahead and change our radius, or our length rather, to 0.2. I think we're going to double click A to deselect everything. And then we're just going to start placing some hairs right here. But you know what? Let's toggle off shape as well, because we kind of want them to be sticking straight out so we can comb them backwards. I think we're going to start with that. We'll go to comb. We'll just start to comb them back. Now I can do the same kind of thing. I'm going to go back to add, turn on shape, and we're going to change the radius to 0.15, and we'll double click A to deselect everything, and we'll just add in a few more hair curves here just to really sell the sides here. Get it low like that, and now I'll comb everything over the ear so that it doesn't look weird. Okay, and I think that is pretty good for a starting point for our mullet. So now we're going to add in some modifiers to actually make this work. So I'm going to go back into object mode here, and we're going to start with hair noise. That's how I like to start all this out. So we're going to grab displace, where is it? No, hair curves noise. We're just going to drop it on there, and that's a little bit crazy. So we can turn the distance pretty much to like 0.01. And then we can play with the scale a little bit. I'm just going to get it to where it's something that feels a little interesting. And then we're just going to turn the factor way, way down. Really what I want is just a little bit of turbulence on those hair curves, so it doesn't all feel super static and like it was combed with a mirrored axis. So something like that is going to be nice. Okay, so I'm going to toggle the slack here, just kind of close that down. And now we're going to actually get our hair curve object. So I'm going to interpolate hair curves like that, throw that on there, it disappears. Let's make sure my, where is it? I want to be sure my my hair cap is selected. So with the hair cap selected, we'll go to the Object Data Properties panel. We'll add in another vertex group here. We'll call this sides hair density. Okay, copy that. And now I'll go into weight painting here, and we can just kind of draw on where we want this to exist. So something like right here. Doesn't have to be exact. I'll probably come back in here and tighten this up a little bit, just to make sure it looks nice, but I think something like this is going to be a good spot to start. So now I can select my hair objects, I can go to density mask, and I will paste the name of my mask there and increase this to, let's just say, 75,000. Let's see what that gets me. All right, that's some dense hair. Fantastic. So now we actually need to add the curve profile here. So we'll drag and drop that onto that. I'll toggle this down and I'll set the radius to 0.003. And now we can actually come back in here and start styling it a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and increase the interpolation to, I'm just going to make it 100,000. 100, 1, 2, 3. There we go. And let's go ahead and start with the clump hair profile. So obviously that doesn't look great to begin with. So what we're going to do is turn off the existing guide map, and that somehow makes it worse. But we can just kind of dial this in until we get something that feels a little naturalistic. Maybe a little lower. Yeah, something like that is going to be nice. And I'm going to change the tip spread so it's much bigger. And just puff the shape up a little bit so it's a little bit, it's almost like a fatter clump. So something like that is going to look nice. We can now add in the curl, which again, we're not going to actually use this to make a curl, but we are going to use it to kind of set the general look of everything, make it a little bit wavy. So something like that is probably okay, about 0.1 or so. And now we're going to change the radius of all the curls. They don't need to be super thick, something like that. And now we're going to drop the frequency way down to like nothing pretty much. Now we obviously get these weird pinching, which is not ideal. So what we're going to do is actually make sure the curl start is quite a ways out. And again, this is not supposed to be super obvious. We want it to be kind of more of a way to add a little bit of randomization. So I'm going to drop this down even more to like 0.04. Maybe we can increase the radius a little bit just to make it a little puffier. And maybe we can drop the frequency somewhere in here. And then, of course, what I really want to do is drop the factor. So that will constrain it quite a bit. Now, that's actually looking pretty good. We can go into Material Preview, and it is white. So what we can do now is go to our Material panel. I'll click New. I'll name this to Hair. And then under Surface, we're going to change this from Principled BSDF to Hair BSDF, just like that. And we'll change it to maybe a... We'll make him a nice, trendy, blue-haired caveman. I think that's going to look cool. So in render mode, we can take a look at this. That's looking very nice. He looks like he should be wearing Cookie Monster pajamas in a Walmart. So that's a good look. That's a pretty interesting look. We can, of course, style this even more. We can get even more crazy with it if we want. But I think that is maybe a really good starting spot. Now the last part of this here, I'm going to duplicate what I already have, and I'm just going to change the hair curves, okay? So let's go ahead and take the mullet sides here. We're going to Shift D, duplicate that. We're going to call this mullet top, okay? And just to make this really simple on me, I'm going to turn off all of this so I can just kind of see what's going on. I'll delete those in edit mode, and then I'll make sure I'm in sculpt mode, and I'll start adding some more in. So again, we want to make the curve shape, let's make it 0.1. Let's see if that's long enough. Yeah, that's long enough. And we're just going to start adding in some curves here. So I'm just going to add in everything around the crown, and then we're going to backfill it kind of like how we did previously. So now we'll go to comb, and I'll just kind of put this in like 5x speed so you can kind of see how I do it, and then I'll show you again how to repopulate everything. Okay, so now we have our hair guides here for the top of the mullet, and I need to be sure I have another density mask for the top. So let's go back to the hair cap here. We'll go to the vertex maps, and I'll just add in another one, and I'll call it top hair density. And now in weight painting mode, I will go in here and I will just draw in the top where it should be. So something like up here is probably right. Might give him a bit of a better hairline than LeBron, but I think that's okay. And then I can go in here and I can start turning back on all my modifiers, and I can figure out, okay, which ones work, which ones don't, and that way it's isolated tweaking. It's not just turn all of them on, it looks horrible, and I don't really know why I have a problem. So we're going to start with the hair curves noise. Just make sure that looks okay. I think that looks fine. Nothing crazy there. Then we'll turn on interpolate hair curves. Now, I knew this was going to be a problem, okay, so I'm not freaked out by it. So I'm going to go here and change the density mask to top like this, and that might be a little too dense for us. It's a little bit less surface area, so I'm going to drop this to 75,000, and we'll see how that performs with the hair profile. Weirdly enough, I think it needs to be a little denser. Okay, there we go. So now I can turn on the clump. The clump is going to need to be a little bit smaller since it's a smaller surface area, so something like that is probably okay for the guide distance. Yeah, that's probably good. And then we can turn on the curl hair, and I think that works. I can maybe change the factor or the guide distance maybe a little bit bigger. Yep, I think that's good. And so now I can double check this, and that looks pretty good. That looks like a nice little caveman mullet. You should now have all the tools necessary to create some really nice looking hair in Blender. Now I've taught you the tools, so now it's your turn. Go crank out a bunch of bad looking hair. It's gonna look awful for a while, and then eventually you'll get pretty good at it and your hair will become less offensive. Take that hair that's less offensive, post it on Instagram, tag me, sweetboy.motion, let me share it with the world, let me promote your work. Please be sure to check out Members Only right here on YouTube. Check it out, see if it's a good fit for you, consider joining. Like this video, comment something, comment how thankful you are for not having an overlay on this video. Every little bit helps the algorithm, even the aggressive comments. And if you're still watching and have not subscribed yet, please subscribe. I hope you learned something useful today. Thanks so much for watching.